For 6 months, Maria Santos thought she was the luckiest customer at Ricci's gas station, always winning the random customer discount that covered her gas when money was tight. She never knew that Tony Ricci had been paying for her fuel out of his own pocket, because sometimes being a hero means making sure no one knows you're one. As Tony sat across from Jimmy Fallon in the Tonight Show studio, his oil-stained hands rested carefully on his knees, still bearing the permanent marks of 3 decades spent under car hoods and beside fuel pumps, serving a community that had become more than customers. They had become family. Tony Ricci, 59, shifted nervously in his chair as the studio lights warmed his weathered face. He wore his best flannel shirt, the green one his daughter had given him for Father's Day, and dress pants that felt foreign after years of coveralls and work boots. For 30 years, he'd been the owner of Ricci's gas station on Route 9 in suburban New Jersey, a full-service station that still checked your oil and cleaned your windshield because Tony believed in doing things the right way. Tonight, he was here because a local news story about his station's closing had revealed something that made the internet believe in kindness again. "So, Tony," Jimmy said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, 30 years running a full-service gas station. That's pretty rare these days. Most places you pump your own gas and never see another human being. Tony's nervous energy began to fade as he found his rhythm, his New Jersey accent warm and familiar. "You know, Jimmy, that's exactly why I stayed full service. People need connection, especially when they're stressed about their car breaking down or running late for work. I've pumped gas for 3 generations of some families, watched kids grow up, get married, bring their own kids to the station." The audience smiled warmly, and Jimmy's expression showed genuine appreciation for old-school service. "What's the most memorable customer interaction you've had over the years?" Tony's eyes lit up with the joy of someone who genuinely loved his work. "Oh man, where do I start? I've seen marriage proposals happen at my gas pumps. Guy had me help him hide the ring in the glove compartment. I've delivered babies when women went into labor while getting gas. I've been a marriage counselor, a financial advisor, and a grief counselor, all while checking tire pressure." Jimmy laughed. "You're like a one-man support system with a gas pump. That's what small businesses are supposed to be, right? We're not just selling a product, we're serving a community. Mrs. Patterson comes every Tuesday, not because she needs gas, but because she needs someone to ask about her grandson in college. Mr. Chen stops by every morning for coffee and to complain about the Yankees. It's been the same conversation for 15 years. Jimmy nodded, clearly moved by Tony's perspective. "And you've seen the neighborhood change over 30 years. Tony's expression grew more thoughtful. "Yeah, a lot. When I started, most families had 2 steady incomes, 2 cars, could afford regular maintenance. Now, I see people driving cars that should have been replaced years ago, stretching every dollar, choosing between gas and groceries. That must be heartbreaking to witness." It is, but it also taught me something important about what my job really was. I wasn't just selling gas and fixing cars. I was helping people get to work, get their kids to school, maintain their independence when everything else felt uncertain. Jimmy's smile grew more serious. "Speaking of helping people, I understand there's a particular customer who changed how you see your business?" Tony's hand stilled on his knees, and something in the studio atmosphere shifted. The easy conversation took on a weight that everyone could feel. "Yeah, there is. And before I tell you about her, I need you to understand something. What I did wasn't charity. It was just human decency. But somehow, it became bigger than that." Jimmy sensed there was a profound story here. "Tell us about her." Tony took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the careful cadence of someone who had been thinking deeply about a choice that changed everything. "Her name is Maria Santos, single mother, 3 kids, Isabella, who's 16, Miguel, who's 14, and little Sophia, who's 8. Maria works 2 jobs, cleans offices at night, and works at a daycare during the day." The studio audience was immediately attentive, sensing they were about to hear something meaningful. "About a year ago, Maria started coming to my station every Friday afternoon, usually around 4 p.m. when she was picking up the kids from after-school care. She drove this old Honda Civic, it may be 2003, that was held together by prayers and duct tape. Jimmy found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. The first time I really noticed her was when she pulled up and asked for exactly $10 of gas. She counted it out in singles and quarters, very carefully, while her 3 kids waited in the car. I could see her doing math in her head, figuring out if $10 would get her through the weekend. Tony paused, his eyes filling with memory. But what got to me was watching the kids. They were so patient, so quiet. No complaining, no asking for snacks from the station store. Just sitting there, understanding that money was tight. The studio was growing quieter, everyone understanding the weight of what Tony was describing. "What happened next?" Jimmy asked softly. For a few weeks, it was the same routine. Friday afternoon, $10 of gas, always exact change. But then one Friday, she pulled up, and I could see she was upset. She'd been crying, trying to hide it from the kids. Tony wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She came to the window and said she could only afford $5 of gas. $5. In a car that probably got 20 miles to the gallon, that's maybe 100 miles. Not enough to get to work and back. The audience was completely silent now, understanding the impossible choice Maria had faced. So, I did something I'd never done in 30 years of business. I told her the computer was running a random customer promotion, and she'd won free gas for the day. Of course, there was no promotion, but I needed to give her dignity along with the help. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, driven by an instinct that had nothing to do with television production and everything to do with recognizing something sacred when you hear it. "Tony, you gave her so much more than gas. But that's not the end of the story," Tony continued, tears flowing freely now. "After that, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I realized that Maria wasn't coming just on Fridays anymore. She was coming whenever her tank was nearly empty, which was happening more and more often." Jimmy walked around his desk and sat on the edge, eliminating the barrier between them. "What did you do?" "I created the Friday Customer Appreciation Special. Every week, I'd pick a random customer to receive free gas. Somehow, Maria kept winning, week after week, month after month. The luckiest customer in New Jersey, right?" Tony reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small notebook, worn from use. "I kept track, not for any business reason, but because I wanted to understand the impact. Over 6 months, I gave Maria about $1,200 worth of free gas." The audience began to stir, not with restlessness, but with the kind of emotion that demands expression. "Jimmy, I learned that Maria was driving 40 minutes each way to her night job because it was the only work she could find that fit around her day job schedule. She was spending almost a quarter of her income just on gas to get to work." Jimmy looked at the notebook, then back at Tony with profound respect. "How did you afford to do this?" "I took it out of my own pay. My wife Rosa and I, we don't have kids, we own our house outright. We had enough. Maria needed it more than we did." Jimmy slid off his desk and knelt down beside Tony's chair, understanding that some moments require you to meet people where they are. "Tony, what happened when Maria found out?" "That's the beautiful part," Tony smiled through his tears. "About 2 months ago, Isabella, her oldest daughter, got a job at the grocery store. Good kid, honor student, wanted to help her mom. On her first day, her manager mentioned that someone had been calling the store for weeks, asking about job openings for responsible teenagers." The audience rose to their feet, not in orchestrated applause, but in spontaneous recognition of something profound. They weren't clapping for entertainment. They were bearing witness to love, multiplying itself. Jimmy stood up and turned to face the audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where business success is often measured in profit margins and customer acquisition. Tony Ricci reminds us that sometimes the most successful transaction is the one where you give instead of receive." He turned back to Tony. "You said this experience taught you something about your job. What did you learn?" "I learned that my gas station wasn't really about gas. It was about keeping people mobile, keeping families together, keeping the American dream running even when everything else was breaking down. Maria needed more than fuel for her car. She needed fuel for hope." Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, but this gesture felt different from all the others. It felt like a recognition between two people who understood service in its deepest form. "Tony, I want you to have this. Not because you're a guest, but because you understand something that every business owner needs to remember. That success isn't just about what you sell, but about who you serve." Tony took the card with hands that had pumped thousands of gallons of gas, hands that had chosen generosity over profit when it mattered most. You know what I learned from Maria? I learned that sometimes the most important fuel you can provide isn't gasoline. It's hope. It's the knowledge that someone cares enough to make sure you can get where you need to go. The show ended differently that night. No desk pieces, no games, no comedy segments. Just Jimmy and Tony talking about community, about the profound impact of choosing service over profit, about how the most ordinary businesses can become extraordinary when guided by love. 3 months later, Tony didn't close his gas station as planned. Instead, he partnered with a local nonprofit to create the Fuel for Families program, helping working families afford transportation costs while maintaining their dignity. Maria was his first official program coordinator, using her experience to help identify other families who needed assistance. The story that brought Tony to The Tonight Show wasn't actually about the free gas. It was discovered when a reporter investigating small business closures talked to Maria about losing her local gas station. Through tears, she explained how Tony's random promotions had kept her family afloat during their hardest months, not knowing until that moment that there had never been any promotions at all. The episode became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments in history, not because it was funny, but because it reminded viewers that heroism exists in the choice to see customers as human beings with real struggles. To understand that sometimes the most important sale is the one you don't make because you give instead. Tony still owns Ricci's gas station, but now it serves a different kind of customer base. Working families who need more than fuel, who need to know that someone believes their dreams are worth investing in. The station has a new sign. Full service means full heart. The notebook Tony showed Jimmy contains more than just Maria's story. It contains records of dozens of other customers he's helped quietly over the years. The widow whose car he fixed for free, the veteran whose inspection he covered, the teenage mother whose flat tire he changed at midnight without charging for the service call. Maria's oldest daughter, Isabella, graduated high school with honors and received a scholarship to study business administration. Her essay about Tony's influence on her family's life was read at the graduation ceremony. She wrote, "Mr. Tony taught me that success isn't about how much money you make, but about how many people you help along the way." Jimmy learned something that night that changed his entire approach to late-night television, that the most powerful stories aren't always the ones that make people laugh. Sometimes they're the ones that remind us that we all have the power to be someone's random act of kindness, someone's unexpected blessing, someone's proof that good people still exist. The Tonight Show continued to entertain millions, but now it also served as a platform for recognizing that every business interaction is an opportunity to choose compassion over commerce, to understand that the person across the counter might be counting more than money. They might be counting on your kindness. Because Tony Ricci taught Jimmy Fallon and millions of viewers that true wealth isn't measured in what you accumulate, but in what you're willing to give away. That sometimes the most profitable day of business is the day you realize that keeping someone's dreams running is worth more than any amount of money in the register. The Friday Customer Appreciation Special still happens at Ricci's gas station, but now it's funded by community donations from people who heard Tony's story and wanted to help. Maria doesn't need the free gas anymore. She got promoted to manager at the daycare, and Isabella's part-time job helps with expenses. But Tony continues the program because he learned that there's always someone who needs to know that luck exists, that kindness is real, and that sometimes winning the lottery is as simple as pulling into the right gas station on the right day. Tony's story sparked a movement called Random Acts of Fuel, where gas station owners across the country began implementing customer appreciation programs. What started as one man's quiet generosity became a network of small business owners who understood that community support sometimes means absorbing someone else's struggle. The original Honda Civic that Maria drove has been retired, replaced by a more reliable car that Tony helped her find. Isabella keeps a photo of that old car on her dorm wall at college, with a note, "This car taught me that the most important journeys happen when you're running on empty, but someone believes you're worth filling up." The gas pump where Tony first noticed Maria counting quarters has a small plaque. Sometimes the most important fuel isn't gasoline, it's hope. Every Friday at 4 p.m., Tony still looks for customers who might need extra luck, understanding that true service means seeing beyond the transaction to the human story behind it. Maria's youngest daughter, Sophia, now 10 years old, wrote a school essay about Tony that won the Yaol's district writing contest. Her essay concluded, "Mr. Tony taught our family that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they have oil-stained hands and hearts big enough to fill your tank when you're running on empty in more ways than one.